Okay. Do we got a second? Let me just brew let me just grab my coffee. I'll be right back. You guys
Can I grab a coffee? Can I grab
Yep.
a coffee?
Everybody can grab a coffee. You get a coffee, and you get a coffee.
This is the AT Banter Podcast, a balanced and entertaining look at assistive technology, accessibility, and its importance in people's lives. Join Rob Minot, Ryan Fleury, and Steve Barclay as they banter with people around the world about anything and everything regarding assistive technology and the disability community. Now, on with the show.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
My name is Rob Minot. Joining me today, Mr. Steve Barclay.
In social isolation.
And Mr. Rick Chant.
Also coming in electronically.
Yes, that's right. This is our new world, folks. We are all recording, of course, from our respective homes. We're back, though.
That's why I could find my cowbell, is because I was working from home.
Yes.
I'm going to have to run over to Ryan's place and pick up the cowbell if we're going to keep doing this. Because the little AT Banter cowbell just doesn't quite cut it.
It doesn't cut it. Either that or we'll get him to sample it. We'll get him to...
I thought it was pretty forward-looking for me to dig my AT Banter cowbell out.
It was.
We at least had something.
Stop being the smart one. You're supposed to be the good-looking one.
There's a story behind that, but we won't get into it.
No. Geez, where to start? You know, what has changed in the past 2 weeks? I tell you, some pretty big news. And of course, we're talking about Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker dropping to digital 2 days early.
Whoa.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
No, of course, as everybody on the planet currently knows, we got a little thing called the coronavirus creeping around, and we're all doing our part, isolating ourselves.
Playing havoc with everything.
It's so crazy. And, putting together the show for this week, because we had planned to take a week off while we were kind of adjusting things. It's like we're living on a completely different planet 2 weeks later.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
So, I was putting together the show and I was like, it doesn't make much sense to me to really talk about anything really other than just sort of what's going on right now. So, I think today, we're basically just going to be talking a little bit about, about our experiences with things. I dug up what I could on, talking a little bit about what's going on in the disability community with all this. Because that's, clearly very important. Although, I do want to start the show a little bit, talking a little bit about CSUN. Now, Steve, you were slated to go to CSUN.
Yeah, unfortunately, I got a cold ahead of that, and not coronavirus, but just a cold, and wasn't able to travel. And glad I didn't, because can you imagine getting on an airplane these days with a cough and a sniffle? And they're gonna take you and stuff you in one of the airplane lavatories and seal it up with duct tape, I think.
Yeah, well, and we sort of kept half an eye on what was going on down there, and there really wasn't a lot announced, it doesn't seem. I don't know if sort of a lot of companies just held off on their announcements, or they're just, busy trying to brace for what this was going to look like. But,
a lot of companies didn't go, particularly the bigger companies that had, policies around gatherings and stuff. So, the HPs and Microsofts, Googles of the world, they weren't there at all. They withdrew. The smaller companies...
They did that pretty early, though.
Yeah, they did. the smaller companies were the ones that tended to be there. But even for them, like LVI, for example, it was strictly their American staff. Their European staff didn't travel to it. There's probably other companies that made that same sort of decision too.
Yeah, it was interesting. It seemed to be the larger corporations that actually took action first. And maybe that's just because they're such big companies that they felt really exposed sending any of their employees and risking any of them.
They've got to take care of their employees, because if somebody gets sick in an office, it's going to go through the office like wildfire.
Potentially, yeah.
And then you're down a bunch of employees rather than pulling the plug on a conference. I think it's, retrospectively, it's probably the best call to make.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the right call to make. I mean, I have to admit, I was surprised that they didn't cancel the conference.
So was I, actually.
But
I'm not so surprised. The problem is that specialty conferences like this, conferences that happen once a year, they run on pretty tight budgets, and to cancel it, there's a lot of upfront costs that they would have eaten as part of it, and it could have sunk the conference. So, it's a tough call for organizers of something like that to say, oh yeah, we're just not gonna run the conference this year.
Yeah,
they want to get as much money through the door as they can.
Yeah, I can definitely understand it from that point of view, but at the same time, you think about, well, I mean, I guess first of all, I mean, they were right on that bubble. Like, if I feel like if it was like three days later, they probably would have canceled. Because
if it had been a week later,
for sure,
rapidly evolving at that point, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous how fast it escalates. A week ago, people were still pretty ambivalent about it. We didn't really have any sort of impact to our day-to-day lives, and here we are a week later, and the streets are not deserted.
Traffic has been great.
Yeah, traffic's been amazing.
I love being able to find parking downtown.
Yeah, I'll bet. All right, well, before we move on through CSUN, why don't we talk a little bit about these new orbit devices? This is one of the only announcements that I could find that came out of CSUN, was from Orbit Research, about 3 new devices that they've developed. Have you read about these, Steve?
Yeah, sure have. So Orbit, of course, is famous for the Orbit Braille display, which is one of the cheapest Braille displays on the market these days. They released, they showed a Braille keyboard, Bluetooth Braille keyboard for controlling devices, which was, great price, $99. And they were showing a 40 cell Braille display. Previously, their Orbit Braille display was 20 cells. This one is 40 cells and has cursor routing, which their 20 cell version does not have cursor routing. They were also showing the Graffiti tablet, which is a tactile tablet system.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I forgot about the Graffiti. Right. So there's four devices.
Yeah.
So which out of the, it seems to me like the Orbit reader is actually the real standout to this, because you're right, $99 for a standalone Braille keyboard that is going to work with smartphones, and it can be paired up to 5 Bluetooth and a USB device at any time, with the ability to switch between them. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's not the first one that's been around. I mean, there was the Braille pen was out there for years. The guys who do the Dot Watch were showing Braille Bluetooth interfaces last year at CSUN. So it's not real new, the idea. What I think makes it attractive, though, is the fact that it's so cheap.
The Orbit Reader 40, as you said, has cursor routing keys. But yet the redesigned 20 cell still does not. So is there a reason why the 20 cells don't have the cursor routing and the 40 does?
Well, I think you're probably looking at two displays for two different purposes. The smaller displays, 20 cell and below, tend to be used by people more for accessing mobile devices. And there just isn't as much editing going on mobile devices typically as there is on desktop computers.
Right.
When you get into the 40 cells, that's when people tend to use them more with computers as opposed to mobile devices. And there you want the cursor routing because you're going to be doing the majority of your editing on a platform like that. So, that's really my only take on it.
Right.
On the flip side of that, if you want a Braille display that has cursor routing and is 40 cell or is 20 cells, then of course there's the Braille Me as well,
Right.
which is available exclusively at Canadian Assistive Technology in Canada.
Boom.
Boom, plug, shameless. Well, it's also interesting to see where the innovation is coming from, because here we have two companies, Innovision and Orbit, who are putting out some of the least expensive products on the market and changing the technologies behind Braille. And they're both out of India. They're both companies that are innovating in a market that, to date hasn't really been known for assistive technology, but here they go.
Yeah.
I think we forget sometimes just how many people there are in India who have degrees and doctorates and stuff. There's some darn smart people over there, and there's a willing and able workforce ready to produce these things.
Right.
Yeah, but at 15 grand.
Well, yeah.
That's kind of the exception to the rule, that tablet. But their Braille displays are very cheap by comparison to other products on the market.
The Orbit Reader 20 Plus, rather, is what, $700, I think, American. The 40 is $1,400. Pretty good pricing.
So 700 US, that's what, 6 Japanese yen and 500,000 rupees.
Well, and who knows, whatever the post-apocalyptic currency will be, bottle caps or whatnot. We don't know how much.
I bid 2 masks and 2 test kits.
And a roll of toilet paper.
And a roll of toilet paper. There you go.
Oh, jeez.
I just emailed you guys a picture of our local Safeway yesterday at 6:30-ish. That was the soup aisle.
Yeah.
The soup aisle. The canned soup.
Yeah.
The canned soup aisle, yeah,
empty.
with pasta and stuff on one side of it and soup and stuff on the other.
The only thing that I was lacking for my preparedness here was flour.
Oh.
I went out looking for flour last week.
Yeah, good luck.
Well, I found some. I had to go to a organic food store and pay a bit of a premium to get it, but now I've got me flour, so I can make bread, I can make pasta. I'm good.
Wait, you make your own pasta?
Julia Childs, buddy.
Oh, jeez.
Yep.
I just
Easy
bought a
peasy.
bunch.
Flour and egg. That's all it takes. A little bit of salt.
All right. Well, you know what? That's a good transition. Let's why don't we talk about the elephant in the room? Well, hopefully it's not in the room. Better not be in the room. Yeah. What's your guys' experience been with this whole thing?
Well, you see, I see it from the inside, or a little closer to central than you guys do, because Suze works at the hospital. They've stopped all her community work now. She's working solely in the hospital, and they've set up one of the wings on one of the floors as a COVID ward. Currently in the process of being populated, about half capacity at the moment. But they're still scrambling for test kits. Not anybody who who thinks they have symptoms are getting tested, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty much the same across the board with everybody else. And they're, you know, they're not going to, she's not going to work in business clothes. She's going to work in scrubs, which she strips off before she gets out of the hospital and puts her business clothes back on to come home in. And everything goes in a tied plastic bag and gets run through a hot wash. So, you know, and the mindset is eventually she's going to come in contact with it. But she's trying to stave that off as absolutely as long as she can. But I think it's coming down the pipe. I think everybody in that industry is going to get it.
Yeah.
No matter how you slice and dice it, and you know, we're just going to work through it.
The thing that concerns me about all of this is that it seems to be that the reaction really trickles down to local municipalities, you know, right down to the actual city or district that anybody happens to be living in, instead of a federal response. I mean, there certainly are, you know, federal and provincial responses, but I think that too much of this is trickles down to, you know, what one particular district is doing. And I think I get the feeling that that's like that in a lot of different countries, you know, but especially Canada and the U.S. And I think that hopefully going forward for the next pandemic, I think that what we need to do on a global level is there needs to just be a global response to these things. There just needs to be a global agency that just can just, you know, put out mandates and everybody just does it.
Yeah.
Part of the problem.
Stop eating bats.
I mean, yeah, I mean, because a lot of this, it always comes down to the weakest link. All it takes is one yo-yo to go to the mall.
Absolutely.
And he screws it up for everybody. Or it just takes one country to sort of drop the ball in their response, and that affects almost every other country in the world.
Sure, all the downstream stuff.
Yeah. So, you know, there needs to really be just one global response. You know, you just have to think back to like a month ago. If we could go back, and if we could be doing this a month ago, we wouldn't be in nearly the shape that we're in right now.
I just want to respond briefly to Rick's flippant remark about eating bats there. There is absolutely zero evidence that this virus was caused by people eating bats. I want to put that out there. Zero. Nada. Squat. Diddly. The DNA analysis of this virus shows that it likely came from either bats or snakes via a pangolin. And it came to humans through pangolins, not directly through bats or snakes.
Okay, that's my mistake. I understood that it was somebody eating a bat.
It was not someone eating a bat.
Well, and you know, that brings
my
up
understanding that you could not transmit this virus directly from a bat because of the differences in physiology. It requires some sort of mammalian host in between humans and whatever the originating species was.
Okay, well, the bat's mammal.
Well, you know, and you know, it's funny because I think this brings up another problem that we have, and that's, you know, information out there that's not necessarily accurate, but just coming from all kinds of different sources, to the point where, you know, nobody really knows all the facts necessarily. And you know, at the end of the day, where it came from, you know, doesn't really matter. I mean, there's a part of me that says, you know, just thank God we're having, you know, our first sort of, well, I guess it's not our first, but, you know, we're having this pandemic with a disease that does have a mortality rate that is where it's at, whether that's 3%. I mean, yes, that's still, you know, a huge number and it's a huge problem. I don't mean to, to minimize that. But I just mean, just think of it if it was a virus that had like a 25% mortality rate or something, and that was sweeping through the world. I mean, that would be terrifying. So I think that hopefully what happened is that we really learned some hard lessons with this, and so that going forward, the next time this ever happens, we're a lot quicker out of the gate with our reaction, because that is the problem.
Yeah, I think if this virus has done anything for us, it's done us a major favor in showing us how utterly unprepared we are for global events of this type.
Right.
If this was a high mortality rate virus, something like an Ebola or something like that, where it shuts down organs and kills people, we'd be screwed.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think I just read today. Didn't China just report that they had no new cases as of today?
I didn't read that this morning.
No reported new cases as of today. Yes.
Right. So I mean, and you believe that or not, because we have to sort of take any sort of stats that you get out of China with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I mean, regardless, it's looking like they're coming out the other end of this, which is heartening in a way. But I guess what we have to remember, just because of the politics of that region, they were able to lock down their country in a way that I don't think we can do.
Yeah, there's a number of problems with our response to it versus theirs. They basically, they were boarding people in their homes. They were blocking off streets. They were barricading things. They were absolutely draconian about how they went about containment of the virus.
Who were?
The Chinese.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Our emphasis on personal freedoms and personal liberties over here really is working against us, and you can see it in these idiots who are down in Florida right now partying for spring break in mass numbers.
Yeah, on the beach.
On the beach, yeah, and in bars and
yeah.
You're hearing them go, oh, well, even if I get the virus, I'm gonna continue to party on.
Yeah, I'm young, I'm healthy. It's not going to bother me until I get home and give it to my parents or my grandparents and watch them suffer.
That's exactly it. They're potentially going to spread it to somebody who is a lot more vulnerable than they are.
And it's the all about me generation.
Yeah.
Well, and the way that I look at it too is that, we haven't, as a global community, I mean, there really hasn't been anything of this magnitude since World War II. I mean, we're sort of 2 generations downstream, and we're not used to the idea of something this serious. You can point to different sort of, events, in the past, 40 years that were a big deal, but nothing of this magnitude. So, I don't think people were really prepared in their mind for just how serious this is and how much it was going to impact everybody's day-to-day life. Even when this was a problem in China, over here we're used to hearing about other countries and the problems that they're having, and that's over there. It's just this mindset that we have, or it's just like, well, it will be fine. The doctors will take care of it. The government will take care of it. We're not used to actually having this individual responsibility where our own individual lives are greatly impacted by this, and our actions really dictate how this is going to play out, and we're just not used to that we're not used to that as a society. I don't think.
Yeah, I think the virulence of this virus has certainly caught a lot of people flat-footed.
Well, it absolutely has. I mean, I was talking to you guys before we turned the mics on. It was literally a week ago when it was business as usual here.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
what's the actual count now? Do we know?
If worldwide, globally?
Globally, yeah.
So right now, total number of confirmed cases in Canada are 736.
Yeah, 142 here.
And there's 34 presumed cases.
Okay.
Presumably,
right.
they just haven't been able to test them yet.
Well, that's hardly.
So 231 in British Columbia.
241?
231.
231. I thought it was.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's funny too, because I was watching the news yesterday. I was telling Rob and Ryan earlier in the week. This week, all of my appointments were canceled. Every single one of them. Everybody canceled everything except for one person. One person wanted a Braille display delivered yesterday. And guess where that person was?
Where?
In the Harrow in the Harrow Care Center, where they just
Oh no.
Oh God.
Yeah, got there yesterday, didn't get past the front desk. It's like, nope, there you go. You can drop it off here. Bye-bye.
Wow.
Have a nice day now.
Yeah. We are
There's so much to talk about this, because there's so many implications and so many things that are going to be happening downstream to this, from economic impact. We could talk for hours about that. I went to the grocery store yesterday, and I went to several. I thought, you know what, I'll grab a couple pieces of
Chef Boyardee.
No, I thought I would actually get, maybe we'll get some chicken breasts to freeze. Or maybe
holy smokes.
forget about that. Forget it. I went to a Save-On, I went to a Walmart, and I went to a Safeway, and they're just like the shelves are bare.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. We had lots of chicken, but we had no ground beef, no beef of any kind, certainly. No lamb, nothing that could be seriously frozen.
Right. So, that makes you go, well, is this because people are actually being unreasonable and hoarding things, or is it because just everybody happens to be buying one or two? It's people, you see online, people are sort of responding to this and being really negative and just being like, people are gross, they're hoarding, they're not leaving enough for other people. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. It could just be that, just everybody's happens to be buying the same thing at the same time. No. And that's creating some, I don't know. What's your take on that?
I think people are scared. I think they know that isolation is coming. And I think that, because we had this conversation with Nicole yesterday, she was absolutely petrified that 14 days meant she was locked in her room at her house and not able to do anything. And I think that's a perception of a lot of people when they say, we're on personal
self-quarantine.
Which is not the case. You can go out for a walk,
yep,
just as long as you keep your distance from everybody else.
Right.
Right. And when I explained that to her, it was a whole different mindset. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of people, is they're thinking that they're going, and for the seniors, I can understand that because of the
yes,
the difference in the mortality rate and how hard it hits the seniors. But there are ways to mitigate that. Why don't you open the store for a couple hours in the morning for seniors?
Yeah.
Yeah, and some stores are starting to do that, which I applaud.
Yeah, they are. They are.
And I think what you're seeing is indeed people are panicking because they think they're going to be locked down for 2 to 3 weeks. And
I think this has a snowball effect too, because once you have, a grocery store have a run on toilet paper, for example, well, everybody needs toilet paper sooner or later, and you go into the grocery store and suddenly you can't get any when you need it.
Right.
So the next time you see it come up, you're going to buy some.
Right.
And the same is true, of your soup aisle at Safeway. Everybody bought your soup. Now the next time soup shows up, everybody's going
to hoard it.
Right.
Yeah, because they couldn't get it last time. So,
but the funny thing around the toilet paper, and people don't realize this, is we are in Vancouver and it is made in New West.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, they make 1 million rolls a day.
Yes.
I don't think it'll be a problem for us.
No.
I don't think so, but
Well, yeah.
oh my God.
It does create a problem, and it does create a problem for, say, somebody who does have a disability and that relies on, say, delivery. This is, and this is another thing that I saw just recently. Stores sort of pleading with people saying, look, don't, if you're able-bodied and you can, like, don't use the delivery service because
That's right. Keep it for people who
really
need the delivery service.
That's right, like like the vulnerable populations, right?
Yeah.
The seniors and people with disabilities.
Yeah. Now, something one of the local schools did here is the grad class, because they need volunteer hours. They have set up with the local, it's not a care facility, but it's an assisted living, to do their shopping for them.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty forward looking for, for a bunch of 15, 16, 17-year-olds.
Yeah. That's the thing about situations like this. You get these examples of people really, stepping up and
Digging deep and
Yeah.
putting their own needs aside.
yeah. And then you've got the knobs, these people who, there was one going around on social media about these people who bought every piece of meat in the grocery store.
Yeah.
And they were bragging about it in the checkout line. Well,
Yeah.
I would seriously want to just punch those people right in the face if I saw them in the checkout line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other one is this guy who bought all the Lysol wipes and was going to sell them on Amazon, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Amazon put the clampers on that in a hurry. You'll have enough Clorox wipes to, you can use them for toilet paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that I'm heartened by, is that for every story that you see about people fighting over toilet paper, rolling around on the floor, people behaving badly, you see people calling them out for it.
Humanity.
You see people, like you said, stepping up and doing what they can, contributing. You see, companies doing what they can to help their employees. There's a lot of goodwill, and there's a lot of people behaving well and contributing. I see far more stories about that than I see stories about people looting or hoarding or whatnot. And even like the looting issue, like I don't know, like I just don't. You don't see that anywhere, and I don't think that that's going to ever be a problem. Because at the end of the day, I think people we understand that we're all in it together. We just got to hunker down and get through it, and everything will be okay.
I think that also speaks to the depth of the seriousness of this virus, though, right? People are not dying in mass numbers, not huge numbers. They're dying, but they're not dying in numbers that the skin is falling off your bones and you have to use your weaponry to protect every last vestige of what you got because you're going to be looted. I think if it was something, a more serious strain of a virus of any kind, that there would be some of that. Oh, John next door just died. Let's go over and see what's in his cupboards.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and in a way, that in a way, it's obviously a really good thing that the virus is, we got the coronavirus as opposed to something more deadly. But but it did also kind of work against us, because for the longest time, people really didn't take it seriously. They look at that 1% or even a 3% mortality rate and they go, okay, well, that's not bad. The flu's, how many times in the past month did we hear people being like, well,
yeah, the flu kills X number of people every year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, and that
makes it so much better.
Well, but it shows a total lack of understanding for what we're dealing with as
Yeah,
well.
it does.
This is not the flu. The flu is a human virus. Our body has the ability to fight this off because it is a human virus. The RNA in this thing is not human, and our body has no natural defenses for it. That's why it's so bloody hard to beat.
Right.
And it's a lung eater. It gets right into the lungs, and that's why we're seeing, seniors, people with any kind of respiratory problems, being the ones who are most vulnerable to this thing. But yeah, the misinformation floating around, and the blaseness that some people are showing towards this.
It's staggering.
I have a relative who will remain unnamed, but I took them to task on Facebook yesterday because they were basically saying, well, I think that this has been around a lot longer because my son had a really bad cold over Christmas and it almost turned into pneumonia. So I think he's had it already, and I'm not going to worry about this.
Oh.
It's like, okay, so here's your theory. It's all a big conspiracy because your son had a cold. That's what she's going with. So I tried to
Shake your head.
I tried to give her information. She wasn't having it, but her take on it is, I'm not going to do anything differently until such time as somebody I know is sick.
Oh. Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's too late.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one thing about, the response in North America is that's going to bite us in the ass. And there was that the month prior to this was the time that had we taken things a lot more seriously, it would have been night and day.
Yeah, I think we'll probably see new protocols come out of this.
That's what I hope.
I think this should be used as a learning opportunity for the CDCs and the the FDAs and the drug administrations around the world.
Yeah.
That this is pretty mild, relatively speaking. It's not leaving a wake of death and destruction in the background. Most people are surviving it, but with it being so virulent, it certainly shows how fast something like this can spread. And I hope they learn lessons about how to manage going forward.
I think that that's a guarantee. I think that we will most definitely learn our lesson, because the implications of this are going to be felt for a year. I mean, by the time
it'll be felt out longer than that.
We could be, because especially when you consider, like, economically, just the impact that this has on every single person, both economically or socially. People are gonna lose people.
Well, I think we're of the mindset, because Susan's working so close with it, we're of the mindset that we're going to get it.
Right.
And, as I say, being not in the age category, I'm getting close, but not being in the age category that it has such a devastating effect on, it's going to be a matter of weathering it out and picking up the pieces afterwards and staying away from people, and then, getting on with it. I think it's inevitable that we're going to get it.
Right.
And I guess that's not quite the right mindset to have, but I think it's reality.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other insidious thing about it, is that, the symptoms, and whether you show symptoms or what symptoms you get, seems to just, be all over the spectrum.
Yeah, some people show minimal symptoms. Oh, I'm running a bit of a fever, and I've got a bit of a cough. Whereas some, it puts them on the broad of their back in a ward at the hospital with
Right.
oxygen and God knows what else.
Yeah.
But
And
the underlying comorbidities play a big role in that too, right? I mean, if you're healthy and everything else, then it's not going to knock you on it might knock you on your ass, but it's not going to have a, devastating effect.
the important thing is it's not going to require hospitalization.
Yeah. Whereas if you've got one lung because you've had lung cancer or you're a smoker or some of the other options, it can have pretty undesirable effects.
Right. This is a good thing. I mean, could you imagine if, 100% of people who got this thing required hospitalization?
Oh,
we'd be screwed. We'd be already screwed. Yeah. So, I mean, thank God that only maybe like 20% of the people who are getting it. And even then, this is the whole reason that we're sitting here in our homes is, this idea of flattening the curve, of slowing the virus down to a point where the healthcare system doesn't get flooded with people who need hospitalization. So we're also very lucky in that regard. But I want to maybe just discuss a little bit some impressions about how this all affects the disability community, and if what you guys have heard through clients or have read. The impression that I get, part of the problem with this is that it was so fast moving that the government agencies, and a lot of the government agencies in both here in Canada and the US, didn't really have a lot of time to react to all of this and really put anything in place that might assist people with disabilities. There's a ton of problems, obviously, for any given community out there. Everything that we are talking about, that even going and getting supplies, that's a whole another level of complication for somebody with a disability.
Oftentimes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you think about somebody who's visually impaired, for example, that goes to the grocery store. Well, think about how tactile they have to be. They have to be touching all kinds of things. So they're doubly, triply, quadruply at risk, I would think. It's just not as easy for them to just go and grab, a cart full of groceries to prepare.
Even if there were groceries to be had.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's the other side of the coin, right?
Yeah.
Just.
Plus, in a lot of cases, they're more likely to take mass transit.
Yep.
Because they're not able to drive independently if they're, visually impaired, for example. That puts them at risk for exposure, just from exposure to the general public. It's not ideal. I think what I'm saying is it's not ideal.
No, it isn't. And then there's people who are reliant on things like caregivers, and what's going to happen if their caregiver gets sick.
Yeah.
Another example is the shortage of hand sanitizer. Well, that screws people over who, say, rely on having those around because they have to do things like catheterize or, who knows what. But yeah, this yokel in New Jersey has a whole, garage full of it. And as a result, somebody who actually really needs it
has none.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's frustrating too. But I mean, I guess, there really hasn't been a central response to this in terms of support and resources for people with disabilities on how to actually deal with all the elements of this new world that we find ourselves in. And that's got to feel even more isolating to the community than they already felt.
Oh, I agree. Wholeheartedly agree with that statement. The one thing that also plays into this are people who are health compromised.
Yeah.
Our local hospital is trying to clear the hospital from as many as you can possibly get out and get them home or get them into assisted care, because of the hospital feels that it's going to have a spike in cases and they got nowhere to put them.
Right.
right? So they're trying to get people out of the hospital so to free up those beds. And I'm sorry, but then you've got healthcare professionals in the community who are going from one client to another to another to another to provide care and assistance, and then all of a sudden, you run the risk of exposure that way.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you guys know, my mom's been in quarantine for the last 2 weeks. She actually gets officially sprung today, but it's just because a care worker who worked with her worked the day before at the Lynn Valley Care Center, the day before the first patient died there.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was the risk of
Exposure.
and they both had to be locked down to make sure that they weren't going to present with the virus.
My hope is that we will catch up on some of these things. I mean, every day it seems like the governments, the districts, they're sort of implementing new things. They're responding to new problems that are cropping up because of all this. And this is all uncharted territory, and that's part of the problem. But I really hope that we catch up in terms of how that we can best support people with disabilities who, may be facing some really hard times right now, because nobody's really thought of that yet. It was such a knee-jerk reaction to respond to this thing across the board that nobody's really sat down and figured out, well, what are the really huge implications for this, for people who maybe it would be a vulnerable population, but they aren't able to, just go to the CDC and look at their, how to prepare your home and just be able to do all of that in an easy way. So, whether the response to that will be sort of a smaller community-based thing where the community rallies around different people who may need a hand with going and getting grocery shopping. And we talk about people with disabilities, but really we should just talk with anybody who maybe would be in a vulnerable demographic, and that's seniors or whoever. I think that as a community, it'd be great to see people really rally around those people and really help them out at this time.
Yeah, and hopefully that's happening. We're just not hearing about it, because the media is too busy focusing on the sensational stuff, the morons who are out there, and the people doing stupid things. So
yeah, I think it's happening. Like I say, the grad class is doing stuff in our community, and there's a group home up the street from us, and I saw Save-On's van there yesterday, and that's a question mark. And they were taking I think they've got 8 residents, and they were taking a fair amount of groceries in there. So it's not only the individuals helping out in the community, but I have to say, our local Save-On has been stellar. Our local Safeway, when they can step up to the plate, they have. And on top of everything else, the local restaurants here, the home delivery service of meals, order in, is just through the roof. So I see us weathering this, albeit not very pretty, but I think we'll come through it.
Well, and I think that it's still, to be honest, and not to be, this is both pessimistic and optimistic, but we're just at the beginning of this.
Agreed.
These are all things that I think we'll see response to eventually, once people sort of get used to the idea of what's the new normal. I mean, right now we're all sort of hunkered down going, okay, well, I guess I'll work from home for a week. I mean, everybody's sort of just taking it day by day or maybe week by week, but who really knows how long we are going to have to do this, or if it's going to get worse, if the lockdown actually does, they do, like we do see something like Italy here in North America. I mean, we don't really know, and every day is a new day. But I think that you're right, Rick. I mean, I want to be the optimist. I always am the optimist. I think we will see people rally together. But I think that I think the message that we need to send is that once you've prepared your place and you've got your stuff figured out, maybe look outside, see if somebody else needs a hand. Think about somebody in your building who maybe that that's visually impaired, and go see if they need something. Like, we really have to all band together, at this time, and really think about other people as well as ourselves.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No, I did want to take a step back at something that you said earlier, Rob, with regards to local governments and municipalities and stuff. Everybody having a different agenda. In the province, there are 6 health authorities, and they administer the entire province. And it's supposed to be, at times like this, it's supposed to be when I blow the whistle, jump. When I blow it again, you can land. They have ultimate authority. Yes, different hospitals are doing different things because of the resources they've got, but the directive is coming from the health authority itself.
I see.
So it's not something that is being done at a municipal level or anything else. It's coming from the health authority. So I just wanted to set that straight. Right.
Okay. Fair enough. Ooh, you know what? I did read another story that is interesting too. Did you guys read about that a lot of these ventilators, some of the parts are now they're using 3D printers to sort of print off.
Really?
Some of the parts for these ventilators to try to help out, to try to sort of get this ventilator problem figured out.
Cool.
Yeah. So again, 3D printing, I'm telling you, it needs to just be a thing.
That's wild.
Right? Yeah. It could really help in terms of, producing, equipment for a situation just like this. So again, I hope that this is something that going forward that we learn from and we figure out, that's what heartens me, right? Like, just people, you see people innovating, you see people behaving well, you see people reaching out and trying to help others in their community. And I think that's, the most important thing to be thinking about at this time, because everybody's stressed out, everybody's worried. And I think the thing to look at this is just that if we just, all have each other's back, we'll get through it. We'll get through it together, and, we'll just do the best that we can.
I agree, Rob. I think, once you've looked inside and made sure that you're going to be okay yourself, that you need to look outside and see who else needs help. And excuse me. It's not only to make you feel good, but it's an action that will have absolutely long-lasting ramifications to those who you're actually reaching out to.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know what? I'm tempted to kind of leave it there. I think we should end on a positive note. What do you guys think?
I agree.
I mean, do you have anything else that you guys want to
We've been bantering for an hour now, so I think it's time to wrap it up and call your neighbor and find out if there's anything you can do.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Well, then let's wrap this up. Who knows? In 2 weeks, we're going to have another show. Who knows what we're going to talk about? Because who knows? But the show will go on. We will be here. I know that our voices calm people, and sure, we'll go with that.
We are your inoculation against insanity.
That's
there
right.
You go. And if people are self-isolating at home, this is a good place to get a giggle.
Yeah, hopefully. Although today's show wasn't a boatload of chuckles, but we'll do better next week.
We'll see what we can do anyway.
All right. Well, hey, Steve.
Yeah.
This feels so weird to say that. Where can people find us?
Well, they can find us via our website at www.atbanter.com.
They can also drop us a line if they so desire. Cowbell at atbanter.com. They can also find us through our many social media feeds like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, listen, stay safe out there. Read books. Watch a lot of Netflix. Catch up on our Netflix, and just relax. And we're gonna get through this. And
hold on, we can't go yet.
Well,
we can't go yet.
Why not?
Last week we offered to give away a number 4 jersey.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I believe we had some takers for that, and we're going to have to do a draw to determine who gets the number 4 jersey.
That's right.
Who's going to get it?
The Chant jersey. But
why don't we do that next week? We'll do the draw over the couple weeks, and then we'll draw. So we'll give people one more chance to put your name in.
The
to
Chant
get
jersey? What are you talking about? I've got my jersey here.
Yeah, we've got another one.
Oh.
So anybody who wants to put their name in to see if they can get the jersey, cowbell at atbanter.com. All right. Well, now that is going to about do it for us this week. Thanks everybody for listening in. Stay safe out there, and we will see everybody in 2 weeks.
This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canastech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com. Or call us toll free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840 or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com.
Whoa, look at that. Master of the one take.